Working in this industry is my passion. It is my purpose. Jojo Oliveri, Maverick. Hi, I'm Jo Oliveri. Welcome to this edition of J-Curve. Today, I want to touch on fees, property management fees that we charge for the service that we provide. And it has been a topic that I have not really touched on for a reason. And the reason why I haven't touched on it is because I think as an industry, we talk about it too much. And what we do is we talk ourselves down. And we talk so much about fees that we don't focus on the service that we provide. We're competing on fees instead of competing on service. And there was just too much focus on it. And like some of the things I share, because I do a lot of coaching and consulting on bringing in new business and growing the business. And to me, part of growth is also retention. So there's no point to growing if you don't have retention, is there? I mean, you can grow and grow and grow, and if you don't retain, then that's just a whole lot of money down the drain, as well as it is damaging your reputation. So let's talk about that for just a few hot seconds, because what I see in a lot of companies is they're telling me and sharing with me about the growth that they've had through the year. And what they're sharing with me is normally that they've got someone who can bring in 10 new managements a month. Well, let's add that up. So if you're bringing in 10 new managements a month, let's just look at the new managements at this stage. You should have added about 120 new doors to your rent roll. Additional 120 to where you started at the start of that year. Now, let's allow for a little bit of loss. Let's say 10% loss. That could be, let's say 20. So you would want to have a net growth of 100. My question I always ask is, and this is just on the number of doors, this is not about the revenue. The revenue is what's important to me, but the number of doors. When you're thinking about someone who's bringing in an additional 10 properties a month, you want to look at how many doors did you start off with at the start of the year. Now, typically what I see is there's either negative growth or it's growth by a handful of doors. So if you're adding on 100 doors, you start at 100, we would want to see that we've got 200 doors at the end of that year. That's allowing for about 20 loss. But what I'm seeing is they start with 100 doors, they've added 120, and they've only got around 100 doors at the end of the year. That is not growth. That is just focusing on bringing in business at any cost and not looking at the service side of things, because you should not be losing managements unless it is for, owners that their intention was to sell, or, reasons have changed, and so they need to sell, or the market is just, there's an opportunity for them to sell. Even so, my philosophy in real estate is buy and hold forever, unless you can sell that property in order to gain, maximum growth through buying another property. But I'm getting a little bit away from this. The kind of like what I'm hearing, the rhetoric all the time that I'm hearing in the industry is we can't charge the sort of fees that we want to charge because owners want to go elsewhere to pay the lower fees that others are offering. And to me, I'm sorry, that's a load of baloney, because we live in a world where there is competition on every product and service that we buy. Now, look at the airlines, for example. How many airlines are there available for passengers to choose from when they are booking their flight, either for business or vacation, or whatever the reason might be? But there's always choice as to whether they want to go for a budget airline or they want to go for the premium airline. And that's not even taken into consideration if they want to go for premium economy, business, or first class. So let's just look at the just a standard economy. There are so many choices, and all of those airlines compete nicely in the air. They all know their why for the service that they offer. They all know the difference in the service that they offer. And consumers, they will look at that and they'll make a choice as to whether they're going to go super, super budget, run the risk of the flight being cancelled, major delays that they, know that airline is, renowned for. It has a reputation for delays or cancelled flights. And they also know that when they choose that particular fare, that they'll be responsible for paying luggage, for being weighed. Their luggage will be weighed when they go on the plane, and they might have to check it in. And so it's going to be more than what the flight would have been on one of the more premium airlines. So everyone has these choices. They all compete nicely in the air. So that's flights. What about hotels? It's the same with hotels. There's a choice of all different hotels. You've got your 5-star down to your, like 0-star, some of them. But everyone competes nicely. You just have to know your why and your service standard, the experience and your promise that you're making to your clients. Don't look at the fees. Know you, and people will pay for those fees that you are charging for your service, as long as you know why you're charging those fees. And, like if your team don't know why you're charging those fees, well, of course they're going to be bogged down in the fear that they can't bring in new business. I mean, you're paying for someone to bring in new business. If they're not bringing in new business, they fear losing their job. So they start to make excuses as to why they're not bringing in new business. And the excuse is normally that other companies are charging a lesser fee. So it just all comes down to fees in our industry. And it is just wrong, because we know people will pay extra for good service. So let's look at when we go to the grocery store. I mean, we can go to the grocery store and we can buy the generic brand and pay $1 or a few dollars less, or we can buy the premium brand. And if you were to look at the surveys they do on the grocery shopping, most people go for that middle of the range. They're not looking for the cheaper. They're looking for the middle of the range, the brand that they know and love, the brand that they can trust, rather than saving a few dollars on cheaper brands. And if you add it all up at the end of the week, maybe when we do our shopping, we might be saving or spending maybe $20, $30, $40 a week more by not choosing generic brands, choosing the middle of the range. But we're quite prepared to pay $20, $30, $40 a week more for a quality that we know and trust, a brand that we know and trust. So when we do our shopping, we will pay that. That adds up over a year. Even if it was $20 a week more that we're paying for the non-generic brands, that's over $1,000 a year more we're paying for something that, is consumed. It's gone. And yes, it can make us healthy, but, we choose the better brands. So why is it in our industry that we are not focusing on the fact that we are looking after a major asset for property owners, and we're not focusing on the dollars that they spend extra on 1% more on management fees, which, obviously it depends on how much the rent is, but it is not that much more. It might be a few $100s a year more by paying, let's say, 8% instead of 7%, or even 6% instead of 8%, or whatever your fee might be. It's only a few extra dollars a week more for a full kind of like average percentage on management fees. So if your management fee is 8% or 9% or 10%, or even if it is 6%, then know why you're charging that and know why you're not competing against other agents or property management companies in your area. Know why you are charging the management fee that you are, along with all of the other fees. So your, letting fees, your renewal fees, your monthly subscription fees, your monthly technology fees, whatever it might be, know why you are charging them. Don't start competing against other agents on fees, because everyone is bringing the whole industry down as a result. We're the ones, our industry is guilty of creating the competition on fees, not the owners. We've brought the focus to fees. So we've got to stop that by understanding why we charge the fees that we do, and have your service fee menu. And, the other thing is, when someone calls you just to ask, what are your fees? Teach your team to talk about the service rather than the fees. Now, when I look at the fees too, it's not just the extra that you might pay for 1 or 2% more on your management fees. It's the net result that you will achieve for your clients. So you will have your stats on getting, more per week above what the market average is, or per month on rent, about the reduced downtime between residents. So if you've got a good process involved there, and I was actually consulting to one company last week about how you earn more for the owners as a net result. And the person who's responsible for growth didn't even know the processes behind things like tenancy renewal or, vacates. And she didn't understand that because of the very stringent process they've got within that company, that it is almost a guaranteed 3-day turnaround from a tenant leaving to a new tenant moving in. So that is, minimum, like the most minimum you can have in downtime between residents. But she didn't know that. So when we added that up, over a year, if there is 2 weeks downtime, 4 weeks downtime, let's take it back to 2 weeks, then the amount that they've saved in a lower management fee has been swallowed up by the fact that they're with a company that doesn't have a detailed process when it comes to moving tenants out and moving in managing that process. So there's a lot involved in, it's not just a management fee, it's the processes that go behind to mitigate loss and maximize revenue for the owner. So you need to know that as a company. How do you do that? And you need to train your teams on helping them to understand when they're talking to owners who come to them and say, I'm terminating my management because this other agency is charging way less, that they'll be able to respond to say, well, lesser fee doesn't mean that you're netting more, and here's why. We need to be able to explain that. Instead, what we have is the teams just saying, well, the owners weren't happy. They didn't have to pay as much with the other company as what they're paying us. So we've got to fight for business, but when we fight for business, it's like it's relevant what we're sharing with them. So, enough of this competing on fees, compete on service, understand what you do in your company to mitigate the downtime, so mitigate loss, and increase the revenue. So making sure that you're the ones that are keeping up, what the market averages are. Now, just a little bit more on that story before I leave. And I was coaching a client not long ago. They had someone in their team who's been with the team for 5 years. And now that person has been moved up to being responsible for bringing in new business. Now, when I was training this person, their fear was that we had discussed what the company's service fees were and every service that was provided. And she believed that there was no way that she'd bring in new business at what their management fee was. And I asked her why. And first of all, she had no idea what the team were doing to mitigate, downtime or loss and increase the revenue. No idea at all. She also said that she had been around the two previous people who were bringing in new business, and the first thing they would do would be to reduce fees because they had pressure on reducing fees. And so they would reduce fees. Now, the question I asked her was, did they convert every person that they spoke to because they reduced the fees? And her response was no. Probably lost most of them. For all the people that they, contacted, they got very few on. And then I said, okay, and now when we look at the rent roll now, have we actually retained those ones that were brought on at the lower fee? She said, no, only a very small percentage are still with us, and they're the ones that, have not been with us very long. So I said, there you go. There's a great example of clients who, when they know your value, then they will be quite prepared to pay for the value of whatever your fees are, because you know why you're charging those fees. You know the results that you're getting for your clients. You know what sort of service and you'll provide to them and what their experience will be. You know their why and how to help them achieve their why. So you become the how to their why. And I won't get into that right now. But I want you to understand, please, please, please stop the rhetoric on fees. We are doing ourselves a disservice because we don't understand what our value is. And if we don't know our value, they don't know our value. So you've got to know your value. And then I think that will be a major step forward in this crazy, crazy race to the bottom on fees. And let me just share with you, the last time I was actually responsible for managing a portfolio and bringing in business myself was the early 2000s. And I was charging way back then 10% management fees. I had a standard of the properties that I was prepared to manage and charge a 10%, which in my market, the others, and is a very competitive market actually, they were struggling to get 7% management fees. Whereas I was getting 10% because I refused to manage them for less than 10%. I might discount some of the other fees, but I never discounted my management fee. And the other thing was, if their property didn't meet our criteria of standard, then I refused to manage it. And I would share with them why I couldn't manage their property. And quite often I would get that property back because they would see that by me having a standard, that they were going to get more for their property as a return and, asset growth, because we were helping to maintain that standard, because that's what our brand was recognized for. So, yes, please think about this. Think about your fees, think about your service, and think about the results that you provide for your clients. And think about all of the processes that go behind the scene in helping to achieve those results for your clients. And if you've got any questions, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to help or, provide some more insight. So until next time, when I see you on the J Curve, stay curious, stay bold, and stay ahead. Thanks for tuning in to J Curve, where we spotlight the journey of growing and thriving in property management business. Reach out and be part of the J Curve community. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and hit subscribe so you never miss out. Let's grow together on J Curve. See you in the next one.